All right, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Carmen Bishop, and if you didn't get the little Teams notification, I did start a recording of this meeting. So anyway, welcome everyone for joining us. If you could please all mute your microphones. I'm getting a lot of feedback. All right, that's better. Great, thank you. All right, welcome and thank you for joining us on your lunch hour to talk about battery energy storage systems and substations. These are two zoning ordinance amendment topics that we are working on, and they might not sound the most exciting, but I was a little bit worried maybe nobody would come, so I'm glad to see a few of you have joined us. So for today, the way we're going to do this is first up, Jackie's going to provide a few slides on the battery energy storage system topic, and then we'll stop and we'll have time for questions and comments on that topic. And then I'm going to do a few slides on the substations, and then there'll be more time for questions and discussion. Since it is the lunch hour, we are just planning to go 1 hour today, so we'll conclude at 1. Now, we have the same presentations planned for tomorrow evening. I think it's at 7 o'clock. And tomorrow evening, it'll be the same. So if you're here and you get everything you want out of this meeting, you don't need to attend again, but of course you're welcome to. But tomorrow evening, I think we'll go about an hour and a half if there are questions and discussion that want to go that long. So you could always join again. And as I mentioned, we are recording this and we will post the recording on our websites afterwards. So people can go back and review it. And also we love to receive follow-up questions and comments as we are working on these amendments. Before we turn it over to Jackie, I will just introduce Jackie. Jackie is a planner in the ordinance administration section with me in zoning administration. And also on the line, we have Bill Mayland, the assistant zoning administrator, excuse me, and Leslie Johnson, the zoning administrator. So with that, I'm going to let Jackie share her screen and take it away.
Jackie, you're muted.
Yeah, we can't hear you.
Thank you. I was talking to myself. Can everyone see my screen okay? Great. Speak up if not. I'll just go ahead and get started. Thanks, Carmen, for the introduction. Again, my name is Jackie. The purpose of today's presentation is to provide an introduction and overview of battery energy storage systems, or shortened for BESS, and share zoning concepts that the county is considering based on a review of other jurisdictions around the country who have implemented zoning ordinance standards for BESS. As Carmen mentioned, at the end of the presentation, we'll have some time for questions and sharing of feedback. You can also add comments, questions to the chat. My last slide provides the project timeline. So I'll go over the next steps of the project and how you can stay updated and involved in the project. Okay, so what is a battery energy storage system, or BESS for short? A BESS is a technology designed to store and manage energy for later use. It uses rechargeable batteries to store energy from the electrical grid and renewable energy sources like solar or wind power. Several types of batteries are currently used, and new battery chemistries are coming to market. The most used chemistry is the lithium-ion battery. These batteries are used in a variety of devices, from cell phones to electric vehicles to large-scale BESS. However, not all lithium batteries use the same chemistry, and they can present different risks and benefits. For zoning purposes, battery energy storage systems can be either a principal or accessory use. BESS that store power that is used solely by a home or business where the battery is located, such as the first two photos on the right, are accessory to the property's primary use. These systems can vary in size, ranging from as small as a residential circuit breaker to as large as outdoor HVAC equipment. Typically, BESS that are considered a principal use are either standalone battery systems that serves to enhance performance and resilience of the local electric system by charging from and discharging directly into the electrical grid, similar to the picture on the last picture on the bottom there, or systems that are integrated with wholesale energy generation, such as solar and wind facilities. Energy storage has a variety of benefits as it can make the electric grid more clean, flexible, and reliable. Because solar and wind can be inconsistent depending on weather conditions and time of day, BESS can store surplus energy produced during high wind conditions and when the sun is out, and release that energy during the night or in low wind conditions. BESS can provide a more stable energy supply, making renewable energy more viable and can reduce reliance on fossil fuel-based power. One of the most significant advantages of BESS is its ability to store excess energy during off-peak hours and release it when demand spikes. By storing electricity during periods of low demand when rates are cheaper and using it during peak demand when prices are higher, users can lower their overall electricity bills. Lastly, for critical infrastructures such as hospitals and emergency services, BESS BESS can provide essential backup power during outages. So where are BESS located? BESS can connect to the grid either through distribution lines serving local utility customers, transmission lines linking distribution systems with distant power plants, or co-located with solar and wind power systems. Overall, batteries are a unique class of energy system infrastructure. BESS are modular and can be configured in virtually any size. They also have limited infrastructure requirements, needing just a concrete pad to sit on and a connection to the electric grid. These two factors, modularity and limited infrastructure needs, means that a BESS can be built virtually anywhere, including near commercial and residential uses. Regarding the existing guidelines in the county's comprehensive plan, if a BESS was proposed today in Fairfax, it would typically require a Public Facilities 2232 review with a public hearing, and in some districts require a special exception approval. The 2232 is a process that determines the compatibility of proposed public facilities with the locational guidelines established in the comprehensive plan. The plan's objectives and policies for proposed electrical facilities include environmental considerations, co-location with other electrical infrastructure, location, noise screening and safety, and undergrounding lines whenever possible. Regarding existing zoning regulations, a proposed BESS facility today would be part of the electrical distribution system and would be considered a light utility facility use in the zoning ordinance. Currently, a light utility facility is not allowed in the II and RA districts. It is allowed by right in the I3, I4, I5, and I6 districts, would require a special exception in all other districts. And for the P districts, except for the PCC, it would be required to be part of the development plan or would need a special exception. Now I'll go over our initial amendment considerations based on our research reviewing other zoning ordinances and best resources. We are considering revising the light utility facility definition to include large-scale BESS. We want to also consider appropriate and necessary locations for large-scale BESS. We're thinking about whether by right facilities be limited to I-5 and I-6 with a special exception approval allowed in most other zoning districts. We also learned that some zoning ordinances differentiate small scale BESS, such as accessory use, from a larger scale BESS by a specific size of the system. We'd like to consider that concept and perhaps specify that there is a size threshold for a system that would be required to meet any use-specific standards of the zoning ordinance, while those under that size threshold, like a residential or a small commercial BESS use, would be considered accessory and not be required to meet the standards. From the jurisdictional research, some communities have applied additional screening or larger setback to limit visibility from residential and commercial zones. We've seen fencing of at least 6 to 8 feet commonly required, as well as more layers of natural screening. Setbacks seem to range from 25 to 100 feet from property lines, buildings, and roads. However, they can vary by location, system size, and zoning district. With our review of other zoning ordinance, we are considering adding BESS specific standards for setbacks, fencing, landscaping screening, and potentially noise requirements. Existing standards for height, lighting, and signage for the underlying zoning district most likely will suffice. Lastly, other standards to consider could include the treatment of power lines placed underground and co-location if possible, reflecting the comprehensive plan policies. While BESS do not emit gases or release pollutants to the air or waterways during normal operation, there is the potential for a battery cell to rupture and vent flammable gases that can start a fire. The safety of lithium-ion BESS is a common concern, especially given reports of BESS fires that have drawn public attention in other parts of the country. However, these incidents have also driven the industry to improve its understanding of the issues and develop more robust mitigation measures, codes, and standards. Local jurisdictions have enhanced safety by requiring detailed safety plans and reports during project approval and involving local emergency response officials in fire and emergency response planning. We are working closely with the Fire Marshal's office on what safety requirements should be considered for the zoning amendment, such as hazard mitigation assessments and emergency response training. Another common standard we've seen is decommissioning the site once it is no longer needed, along with a financial security plan requirement for the decommissioning process. Requiring liability insurance is also another option. Here is the project timeline. In January, we presented the same information of initial research and amendment concepts to the board's Land Use Policy Committee and the Planning Commission's Infrastructure Committee, and are providing that information today for the public's understanding and feedback. After these community meetings, we will begin drafting zoning standards to present to the Board of Supervisors, Land Use Policy Committee, the Planning Commission's Infrastructure Committee, and the public in June. The board and the Planning Commission's committee meetings are open to the public and are also broadcast live on Channel 16 and on demand. And the upcoming meetings in June, like this one, will be held virtually. The public hearings before the Planning Commission and the board for this zoning amendment are tentatively scheduled for the fall of this year. And all hearings will include opportunities for the public to submit written or oral testimony for the board and or Planning Commission to consider. To stay updated on the progress of the project, you can check the project webpage. I have that posted here, which also includes an FAQ document that provides similar information that was shared and presented today. You can also sign up for email updates and receive them right to your inbox on all zoning amendment project work. And also, please feel free to email me with any questions or comments as they come up. Happy to collect those and answer any questions you have. Now, I'm happy to take any questions, comments, and like I said, if there's any that come up after today, feel free to send them via email. Okay. All right. Yes, go ahead,
Yeah,
Carmen. Should I just go?
yeah, I didn't know if you're able to see who's raising their hands or not, or if you need help with that since you're sharing your screen. But I think Elaine raised her hand.
Okay, let's see. Elaine, please go ahead.
Sorry, I couldn't figure out how to unmute it.
Oh, no worries.
None of the buttons were working. Okay, I know I'll just be frank, I know very little about any of this, but it caught my attention because I attended one of those either planning commission or board of supervisors meetings where you guys briefed. And my issue has been with them is that there's this new mixed use policy and they keep moving people into commercial and residential areas. So as I saw this coming up, I would just say that kind of thing needs to be thought about so that there truly are requirements in place that do keep these things like away from people in a close proximity. I would think that just like the fire and explosion thing would be such that you wouldn't want it to be in any close proximity to residences and areas where children might be playing or things like that. So that's why I was very curious as how this whole ordinance would take place and what changes would go in there. But that's my big concern is that things really environmentally and health and safety wise. And we talk about too, the Healthy Communities talks about, just having a nice environment to live in. And you saw with the data centers probably, how people went up in arms about the noise and all that stuff. So if there's any of that kind of thing too associated with these, we just need to be really sure that we are protecting people. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, let's see. Cynthia?
Yeah, hi. Good presentation. Thank you for that. I just had a hypothetical. So if a community has an area, and this would be a residential community, has an area where they may have solar panels that provide a BESS with storage so that they then provide that to the grid. What types of insurance? You mentioned there would be possible liability and decommissioning insurance for that. Is this something that currently you're seeing out there already where residential areas might have these like solar panels that provide a BESS with energy storage for the grid, but then now they would have to then have this extra liability and decommissioning insurance? Do you see that that's a common thing throughout where these BESS already exist, maybe in residential areas? Maybe if you can just talk a slight bit about that. Thank you.
Sure. And let me make sure I understand. If I don't, please just pipe in. But the ones that we're talking about today are these larger scale battery energy storage systems that are going to support the electrical grid. So the electrical companies like Dominion here in Northern Virginia and Fairfax would be the ones working with them to collect that energy and discharge it when needed. There could be times when someone's house has a solar panel on the roof and they have a battery energy storage system that is collecting that energy and storing it for the household's use. And those are what we are calling accessory and would not be at the scale or the size of what this zoning amendment would be looking at. So if you saw some of the pictures that were in the presentation of these kind of like areas where there's a lot of these shipping container sized BESS, that's kind of what we're looking at that are specific for the electrical system in our communities. And those, the people like Dominion, or if it's a private entity that is managing them, as part of the approval process, we've seen that they've required a liability insurance provision for the approval of the project and decommissioning plan that also has a proof that they can fund that decommissioning plan for when that occurs. So it's not typically what we've seen like a residential area that is doing that by itself, but more of an electric utility system development.
Okay, so just to clarify, so then in the residential area, you're considering them accessory uses. So you are going to, and I'm assuming that's not yet been done, but you will be identifying what you consider small scale versus this larger scale. Okay,
absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, let's see, Fahim.
Hi, Jackie. Thanks for the presentation.
Sure.
I had two quick questions. One, when will this presentation be made available on the website that you linked? And then the second question is it possible to go back to the slide that showed the different types of, categorization, sort of the accessory use versus, I think there was the smaller residential and then the kind of more industrial. Perfect.
Is this
Thank
the
you.
one? Yes. Okay.
Yes, thank you. So, if there's, say, a data center or a hospital or some other like large user that has a BESS on site, you may have, and I apologize, you might have mentioned it. Would that be considered like a mid-sized commercial, like an accessory use? Accessory to, for example, the hospital or data center?
Okay, so first question, yes, we will be posting the presentations up on those websites, both Carmen, the Substation one, and the BESS one after tomorrow's presentation for sure. So those will be up and ready to view shortly. Regarding the type of like accessory versus a principal use, as we kind of talked about with the previous question, we're looking at size. We're looking at to see what size threshold might be appropriate for when, how, depending on how big the size system is, these zoning standards for bigger setbacks, more screening, a noise component would come into play. Because we don't want, like, for someone that a residential use or a small commercial use that has it to support that principal use to when it's a smaller system to need to meet those standards. But when it's large enough that it's going to have an impact on land use, that's when we want those to go through the review standards for BESS. So that's something we're still looking at on what that size threshold is. There's a variety of kind of sizes that jurisdictions are using around the country. So we'll be figuring out what works best for Fairfax and presenting that for feedback.
Great,
If
thank
I
you.
might.
I
Hold
had
on,
one follow-up
David.
question.
Sure. Yeah. Hold on, David. Yeah. Go ahead,
The
Fahim.
follow-up question is, what localities are you looking at as examples for modeling this ordinance amendment off of?
Sure. There's well, we were definitely looking at those that have them in Virginia. So there aren't that many. BESS is still kind of a new use, a new technology. It's been more common on the West Coast in California, I think Texas, some of the Midwest. So there's not like a lot of jurisdictions that have ordinances specific for battery energy storage systems. Some are more general for just energy storage. So like I said, we've done Virginia, as well as the state of New York did a state guidance for their jurisdictions, which a lot of jurisdictions around the country have used to help them develop their own zoning ordinance standards. So it's kind of been throughout the country that we've been looking at different ordinances, and they're still coming up, and I'm tracking those that are also going through similar processes.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, if I might just, there's been a lot of discussion about what size threshold to make the the cut between the large commercial and the mid-size commercial. The International Fire Code, not the Virginia Fire Code, but the International Fire Code sets a threshold. I believe it's 600 kilowatt hours, and that's probably a pretty good thing because the International Fire Code, which I think we should adhere to rather than the Virginia Fire Code, which is loosely modeled on the International Fire Code, has a lot of very specific requirements for safety. And I think it would be fair to say that if you have a plot of land that cannot meet any of the setback requirements in the International Fire Code, you probably shouldn't approve that plot of land for the in our zoning. What I'm saying is the zoning amendment should reflect that, so that you wouldn't approve zoning on a piece of land that couldn't meet the International Fire Code requirements just because of the size and the placement of the land. That's one thing. The other thing is, I get the sense that all of these zoning things are specific to the lot itself and no other infrastructure. So for example, if there are no fire hydrants nearby, like within 400 feet, it would seem to me that would be a critical element for approving zoning of a piece of land for that, for a BES. I don't, and you said there's no infrastructure requirement. Well, there is an infrastructure requirement. You have to have fire hydrants nearby, and you have to have a road and an area around it, around the BES, large enough to support the multiple tanker trucks and fire trucks that will be required for weeks to fight any fire. So I think, I don't know how how maybe that's a planning issue rather than a zoning issue, but I think it certainly should be looked at in the zoning. The site you showed is right next to my house, as a matter of fact. And there's a bridge that you probably couldn't drive the batteries over because batteries are heavy. And there are no fire hydrants within 400 feet of that site. And so I don't see how that could be allowed to be zoned as this, because it wouldn't be able to meet any of the fire code requirements. And I think that the zoning should incorporate the fire code requirements rather than just requiring the fire commissioner to say, oh yeah, it looks okay to me, because that can change.
Thank you for those comments. And that's why we're still researching, and we'll be coordinating closely with the fire marshal's office on how these are reviewed, and if there's anything specific related to this type of use that should be included as part of this zoning amendment.
Yeah, I would also ask, because you said during this meeting, and it was said during the meetings in January, that the industry is constantly reviewing, taking lessons learned from the several fires and applying them. I would like to know what specific changes to the fire code have been applied since the Moss Landing fire and since the Gateway fire. Those are the things I would like to know. What are the specific changes? Because I've heard the fire commissioner talk about that, but I don't know of any specific changes. The only thing I know of for Virginia is the Virginia Fire Code, which is much looser than the International Fire Code. And I think we're making a big mistake if we are not applying the International Fire Code.
Thank you for your comment. And I'll look into the changes. I know one part of it is some of the BES that were part of an older building. Some of the lessons learned was the change to some of these container styles where there's more spacing. So I know that was one lesson that was part of kind of over time, but I will definitely I'll take a closer look at that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Renee.
Hi there. I had to step out for a moment in the middle, so hopefully I didn't miss it. If I did, just tell me. I'll look at the slides and recording later. But for the ordinances, are the population densities similar in the other areas that you've been comparing to Fairfax County, or are we a denser area?
Good question. Looking all over for Virginia, there's none of the Northern Virginia except for Loudoun has a ordinance on battery energy storage systems. Otherwise, we have looked at other California, a lot of California jurisdictions that are more dense. Right now, I'm reviewing and looking at the county, San Diego County, who's looking at revising theirs. So it's kind of a mix as sizes throughout the country of who's putting these into their zoning ordinances.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay, I don't think I see any other hands raised, but again, like I said, if anything comes up, send me an email and I'm happy to find the answer to your question, or if you just want to send a comment our way.
Right. So we're going to move into the substation topic now. So thanks for putting that. Bill has put in the link to the web pages in the chat. And Jackie, you're still sharing your screen. I'm going to go ahead and do that. So I just have a few slides, and then there'll be plenty of time. All right. Are you seeing my screen or my notes page?
Neither.
Neither. Let me fix that. All right, how's that?
That's good. I see it.
All right, great. Okay, so we are doing these two topics together. They're not exactly on the same timeline, but kind of close. Whoops. And they are both, you'll see in a minute, they're both under the zoning ordinance, light utility facilities. So that's why we have been talking about them together somewhat. So substations, it is on the zoning ordinance amendment work program. We've been researching the topic, and then like the BESS, it was presented to the board's Land Use Policy Committee and the Planning Commission's Infrastructure Committee back in January. And those presentations and the discussion, all of that is available online if you want to go back and check those out. So since then, we have been doing additional research, and we developed draft amendment text for substations, and that is posted on the website. So I hope you have checked it out, or you will check it out, and please send me any questions or comments on that, because we are hoping to move forward pretty quickly to authorization. So that is tentatively, we're hoping to bring it forward for that on June 10th. And then if it is authorized, and all authorization means is that the board is saying we can go forward and schedule public hearings. And so then if so, then a planning commission public hearing would be scheduled in July. I think that's July 16th. And then a board public hearing in August, and that would be August 26th. Again, if the board does authorize that. So substations are an essential part of the energy network. They connect transmission lines. There are two types of substations. There are transmission substations that assist with moving bulk electricity over long distances, and distribution stations, which bring the power down to the distribution level to get it to the end user. Both Dominion Energy and Novec have indicated that they ideally look for properties that are about 15 to 16 acres in size, but the size seems to vary widely. We have some substations here in Fairfax that are on lots under 5 acres in size, but Dominion has indicated that a substation could occupy up to 30 to 40 acres in size. They, of course, have various equipment, and the height of that equipment can vary. So in one application, for instance, it noted that the circuit breakers were about 15 feet high, the transformers about 29 feet high, and the static pole and backbone structures were about 75 feet high. And then we've had other applications with transmission poles that are 95 feet high. So we do have some tall equipment happening. Substations are also typically enclosed with security fencing, and that ranges from 10 to 12 foot high. Could be just a chain link fence, or sometimes they have taller walls or decorative walls, or even they can be a building type enclosure. So the trend in our recent years for substations here has been for either the upgrading of older facilities or for new substations in support of data center development. So electrical substations, as I mentioned, they are considered light utility facilities under the zoning ordinance. So these are those facilities that are part of the distribution of utility services. I'm not going to go through all the permissions because they are the same as what you just heard Jackie go through for the zoning ordinance, and substations are also subject to that 2232 review process under state code. The use standards, they do specify that lot size and bulk regulations do not apply to any light utility facilities currently. Substations are also not subject to your maximum fence height limits in the zoning ordinance. In residential areas, so if a substation is proposed to go into a residential area, and that's always going to require a special exception, the board does need to find that there's no alternative site in a commercial or an industrial district within 1 mile for a transmission station or 500 feet for a distribution station. The zoning ordinance does also require type 2, that's the 35-foot wide transitional screening next to residential uses, and also a 6-foot high solid fence or wall next to residential. So for the initial draft of the amendment text, which, as I mentioned, is posted on the website, it includes revised permissions and standards. The permissions as part of this could be revised to limit your by right substations to just the I-5 and the I-6, which those are our most intense industrial districts. And then an SE would also be allowed in I-5 and I-6 to modify standards. And then an SE would be required in all other of the zoning districts. And so what this is doing, it is changing the permissions from by right to SE in the I-3 and the I-4. And then it also would require an SE in the planned districts, removing where currently there is an option for development plan approval, and also adding in the PCC district just for consistency. And then additional use standards could be considered to address the visual and potentially noise impacts. Currently, substations, as I mentioned, along with other light utility facilities, are exempt from zoning district setbacks, and that exemption could be removed. Setbacks could also be required for new or expanded substations from adjacent residential, from a public or private street, and also from commercial development. And then screening could be required within that setback area to include a visually solid fence or wall and landscaping. And then the standard that I mentioned before about the review of alternative sites, that could be modified to include consideration of co-location or expansion of an existing substation if it would result in reduced impacts on the residential area. And then also to revise those distances to be the same, perhaps 1/2 mile for all types of substations. And then the draft text, it probably looks pretty involved. Some of it is a lot of different minor edits and organizational changes. And that's all I have on my presentation. That's the website that is also in the chat. And if you're in this meeting, you probably have found the website already. So let's see, I'm gonna check the chat and see if there are any. I don't see any questions there. And Cynthia.
Yeah, hey, okay, so I looked at the summary and the information provided. I have a couple of questions. One is, the actual four public institutional community uses, section X, utility facility light. Um, Number one and number two have been removed and replaced with number six. But what I'm a little confused about is I come in here and I say, okay, I'm looking at building a substation. Maybe it's a smaller one, but I'm going to need distribution or transmission poles that are attached to the facility that are over 50 feet. And you've removed the information that says what you need to do or where you need to go to find that information. So with the new revisions, my first question is, how do I know where to go? There's no information any longer. It's been completely removed.
Yeah, that 1 and 2, they actually are somewhat of, I would say, an organizational mistake with ZMod, where those really apply to your wireless facilities. And if you look in the way they're worded, they refer to the wireless facility standards. And so they are repeated there. And so, we do want to stay cognizant of FCC rulings that require us to treat facilities similarly. So that's why we didn't totally get rid of it, and we instead referred to the substantive part of the screening that relates to the small cell facilities. But otherwise, that was never a requirement that just because you're doing a transmission pole, which honestly is either going to be part of the substation, which we absolutely regulate, or you could have a transmission pole that's part of a transmission line that's regulated by the STC. So
Right, okay.
I guess that's a long, complicated way of saying that we are not intending to take anything away.
Well, I guess what I'm suggesting is that for number six, where it says the new utility poles that are not more than 50 feet must comply with subsection 102.4Y5, blah, blah, blah. Maybe, comma, all others, please see wireless facility. Just as a clarification, because it's now no longer there. So where do I go? That it's just
well, it would, yeah. We don't need to say go see wireless. I would just say from my own personal approach to organization, because wireless says what it says. But let's say you were adding a transmission pole in a substation. That can be part of the substation application.
Right.
So it could be wireless, but if it's part of the substation, then it's still regulated as part of the substation.
Okay, I'm sorry. It's just very confusing that it's no longer there in terms of, you have this restriction on under 50 feet, but then you completely ignore over 50 feet now. So that's all I'm saying.
Well, I appreciate that when we don't want to be confusing. So we'll take a look at that. Do you have any other, while your hand is raised, do you have any other questions or comments?
I did. I'm a little concerned about the just the blanket removing of the or conflating the two substation setbacks to a half a mile instead of having it a mile from residence, unless there is an alternative. But what I'm concerned about is that doesn't really take into the different sizes of these transmission and substations. And as they can grow over time, they may put in a substation and then it may become a bigger substation. So my concern there is taking the lesser value of the half mile versus the mile. Can you provide a little bit of insight as to why that was done? Thank you.
Sure. So it's not actually the lesser, it's kind of an in-between is what we have in the draft, because your distribution stations currently would be captured by the 500 feet. And that doesn't seem like very much to us. So that's why, we wanted to find a middle ground there. So, if your comment is that you think it should be the 1 mile, I understand that comment as well.
Well, my comment was just to say that, minimum for the distribution stations to be half mile, should not be 500 feet. That is very close. But for these larger substations that are transmission substations, they really should be kept at a mile. That's my comment. Thank you.
let's see, Aaron?
Hi, yeah, thanks for the time and for the meeting. Just wanted to ask the question about how the 2232 process and the potential special exception process would work. If the 2232 is the first step and that considers co-location of other facilities, the character of surrounding areas, distance to residential, all of that, why would there also be the need for a special exception process? Like if both from a battery storage, also from, substation light utility, if that kind of passed the 2232 process, what would the additional special exception process, why would that be required if the county's already reviewing and saying, hey, this meets X, Y, and Z, and we agree that the location is appropriate because it's not close to residential. Why would there need to be an additional special exception process if it is in I3 or I4?
Yeah, sure. So currently for substations, they they do require the 2232 review, and typically I'll say, and they also in many districts, like in your residential, they already require an SE. And so when both of those are required, those applications are generally processed concurrently. So there's no added time when they're processed together. I will say there are some differences in the review. The 2232 is reviewing and that's an important review process. I don't want to minimize it at all. It's reviewing the location, character, and extent. And as far as that goes, sometimes the zoning ordinance might have a different standards as well that we would be looking at specifically. And there can also be development conditions attached to a special exception where there are not development conditions attached to a 2232.
Yeah, understood. And then I just from I don't know, thinking it would streamline things from y'all's standpoint, if the setbacks are, what we all agree is, hey, like this is a good idea to have setbacks and buffers and screening. If those are the, development standards that are agreed to be good, it just seems like it's a redundant, bogged down process if you have a 2232 and then also a special exception process when it just could say, hey, like here are the standards that we agree are good for substations. And, if it passes the 2232 process, then what's the point of a special exception process? But just thinking through ways that things can be streamlined and not, extra processes that slow things down, make things harder, make more work for the county, et cetera. But
Sure. So let's see. And I see you have a comment in the chat. I don't know if you want to unmute and speak to that, or I can read it for everyone. All right, so I'm going to read it then. And asks, what would be the reason of reducing the alternatives analysis to a half a mile? And so, as I mentioned before, currently the distribution substations and those are not always small either. I guess I'll point out that, for instance, a substation that is associated with a data center is also often a distribution station. Those are currently, the review distance is 500 feet. So the half mile would be an increase for that. Then the transmission stations are currently subject to a 1 mile review. And we were looking to make them the same, thinking that, I do think that the impacts are very similar. And sometimes you've got substations that are both transmission and distribution. So that was just kind of our thinking, trying to make them the same. And let's see, the size of substations for data centers have grown tremendously, both in height and footprint. How does this proposal protect adjacent homeowners or businesses in I-5 or I-6? So there, I think, and you probably mean homeowners or businesses that are adjacent to I-5 and I-6, unless you mean, because there are no homeowners in I-5 or I-6, but adjacent. And so that's exactly what this amendment is aiming to do, to require setbacks and screening requirements for adjacent residential, and even some businesses that are in commercial districts. So even if they are in I-5 and I-6, they would be subject to the setback and the screening requirements. And then I will note that while the screening requirements read very similar to, and we've of course borrowed the language from the Article 5 with the transitional screening and barrier requirements, by placing them in the use standards as we have, they are not subject to administrative modification, nor are they subject to the 2/3 reduction that's in Article 5. So if those setbacks and screening would not be met, then the only alternative would be to get a special exception. So I hope that answers your question, Anne. Feel free to unmute and add to that if you have more. All right. And let's see, Cynthia put in the chat, impacts of very tall transmission poles is different for transmission substations.
Yeah, my only comment there is that we actually live near substations, and there are 2 more going in near us as well. And as we've been to the open houses for Dominion and such, and as we've seen these new transmission poles go up, they're enormous, and they call them towers. They don't call them poles. So my concern here is not making that distinction between a transmission substation and a distribution substation, and just having that half mile for both. I think you might want to reconsider that. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for either the BESS or the substations? I know this might not be your most favorite way to spend your lunch hour, so I really do appreciate that you have done so. And it might take, I don't know how long it takes, a few days, maybe, but we'll get the recordings posted on the website. And both Jackie and I are happy to receive emails or schedule follow-up conversations with anybody who might want to talk about these topics. And then I think Jackie's, remind me, your next step in the process is a June committee meeting.
Yes, we're hoping to present the draft text in June to the committees and the public for feedback.
And then I'm hoping that the next step for substations would be authorization. And so that's why, this feedback is important, so we can make revisions to proposed text for authorization.
I'm sorry, Carmen, when you said that, I didn't hear a date. I'm sorry.
Oh, so June 10th is when I am hoping for it to be brought forward for authorization. And as you know, that is just a where the board says that we can go ahead and advertise to schedule public hearings.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you both very much.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.